Assalamu alaikum. My name is Yasmeen Khayr. I'm a research coordinator at the Center for Urban Research and Learning at Loyola University Chicago. The work I will be presenting on is from my master's thesis focusing on gender and sexuality beliefs among Muslim men on college campuses with a particular focus on sexual assault beliefs. So research on sexual assault has primarily focused on women and survivors and less so on men and perpetrators. So men in general are highly underrepresented in the literature, and Muslim men even less so due to heightened stigma around sex, sexuality, and sexual violence. Muslim men are interesting because they occupy an intersection of identities that place them as both part of a dominant gender identity and a religious minority within the United States. So what this means is that while they may face marginalization and discrimination due to their Muslim identity, they also have a tendency to elevate their sense of male dominance through heteronormative gender roles. So with this in mind, I wanted to dig deeper into sexual assault attitudes and ask, what attitudes do Muslim men on college campuses hold regarding sexual assault? And how does their religiosity and adherence to masculine role norms impact those attitudes? So before delving into this research, I do want to note that this study does not mean to reify Islamophobic notions that Muslim men are inherently violent, but rather to locate Muslim men within a larger gendered structure that perpetuates violence. And to just set this up a bit further, the study came out of research done between the Center for Urban Research and Learning and Heart Women and Girls, which is a national organization focused on sexual health, education, and sexual violence prevention among Muslim communities. So together we conducted research and evaluation focused on their Sexual Violence 101 workshops and found that Muslim men had statistically significant differences in their perceptions of sexual assault myths as compared to women and non-Muslims. And so this alerted us to dig deeper into the intersection of gender and religion as it pertains to how Muslim men are socialized to think about power, sexuality, and sexual assault. So to understand how sexual assault attitudes are formed, we must understand how it is deeply rooted through rape myths or generalized cultural beliefs that perpetuate aggressive behaviors and victim blaming to undermine the gravity of sexual assault. So many studies have associated these behaviors and perceptions with sex and gender role stereotyping that are rooted in patriarchal notions of masculinity. And so we place sexual assault beliefs within the larger context of hegemonic masculinity, in which it perpetuates and naturalizes a gender hierarchy within a social structure and through social action. So this is often through fostering sexual aggression and hostility towards women. And while there has been less research regarding the role of religion for Muslims impacted by sexual assault, we have to look at how our faith is being taught to us and how that impacts how we understand sexual assault. And so while Islam as a faith tradition frames sex and sexuality as forms of worship and service to God, patriarchal interpretations of sex has been dominated by men and have historically institutionalized sex as impure and as an act that must be suppressed. So these interpretations operate as religious justifications for shame, and they reinforce a gender hierarchy in which men are morally regulating the purity and sexuality of women as a form of power and control. So sexual assault attitudes are then perpetuated by patriarchal power and control through the manifestation of gender and religion. So through this theoretical framework and the exploratory nature of this research, I committed to using quantitative methods through an online survey to understand a breadth of information surrounding Muslim men and their beliefs around sexual assault, masculinity, and religion. I acquired 47 participants who fully completed the survey through convenience and non-probability sampling from various college campuses in the Chicago area. The survey included demographics and 3 pre-tested metrics, including the rape attitudes and beliefs scale, masculine role norms inventory revised, and psychological measure of Islamic religiousness. As well as I also included various questions that I adapted from a resource Heart created focused on myths surrounding sexual assault in Muslim communities. So most of these metrics also followed a similar response scale ranging from 1 to 5, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Now, I won't go into every mean that came out of the descriptive statistics, but I wanted to show the various measures within each set of questions. So for sexual assault attitudes, there were statements that centered on blame or victim blaming, tactics used to do harm, justifications that excuse sexual assault, and the sexual assault myths in Muslim communities. For masculine role norms, these statements centered on sexuality, dominance, and aggression. And finally, the religiosity section focused on religious beliefs, religious duty, and global religiousness. So with this in mind, let's dig deeper into the sexual assault attitudes, which are meant to answer the main research question: what attitudes do Muslim men on college campuses hold regarding sexual assault? So overall, the composite mean was 4.36 across these measures, and that revealed that respondents had a propensity to disagree with the sexual assault attitudes. So statements regarding justification and tactics revealed a strong tendency for respondents to disagree, such as the statement, if a woman is unsure about whether she wants sex, it is okay for a man to persist until she flatly says no, with about 65.9% strongly disagreeing. Whereas statements around blame and the Muslim myths presented more variability. For example, a woman who willingly gets drunk, then is raped, has more responsibility for what happened than if she decided not to drink. And 10.6% strongly agreed, and 17% slightly agreed. So additionally, when presented with the statement, if a woman wears hijab and dresses modestly, she will be protected from sexual assault, 51% of respondents strongly disagreed, 14.9% slightly disagreed, and 8.5% strongly agreed. So based on this variability in statements centered on victim blaming and myths within Muslim communities, we can infer that some Muslim men may instrumentalize blame, justifications through cultural religious behaviors, and fear as a means to undermine the experiences of victims and constructive ways of dismantling the deeper causes of sexual assault. So the overall disagreement with tactics and more overt forms, overt justifications for sexual assault reveal that Muslim men may recognize the harm in behaviors that force sex upon women, but may not completely understand the covert forms of perpetuating behaviors that justify the act of sexual assault. So now moving on to our second research question, we focus on understanding the impact of masculinity and religiosity on sexual assault attitudes. Thus, we used gamma testing to understand the relationship between these beliefs. So when looking across various tests between sexual assault beliefs and religiosity, there was little association. However, when looking at tests between masculine role norms and the sexual assault beliefs, many of these revealed strong significant relationships. So for example, this sexual assault belief, if a woman wears a hijab and dresses modestly, she will be protected from sexual assault. When that was crossed with a statement of masculine dominance, which was a man should always be the major economic provider in his family, this revealed a gamma of 0.65, revealing that masculine role norms are much more likely to have a relationship with sexual assault beliefs. And so these findings were corroborated by Spearman's correlations and ordinal logistic regressions as well. So while I conducted individual tests between only masculinity and sexual assault beliefs and between religiosity and sexual assault beliefs, the results were similar to the ordinal regression conducted between all three, so masculine role norms, religiosity, and sexual assault beliefs. And overall, together they formed a statistically significant model where masculine role norms and religiosity explained about 31.1% of variance of sexual assault beliefs. However, only masculinity was a statistically significant predictor in comparison to religious duty and global religiousness. So what does this all mean? In terms of masculinity and the variability across these masculine role norms, they reveal an adherence to traditional gender roles and perpetuation of sexual assault as a form of hegemonic masculinity. So while we cannot say to what extent Muslim men perpetuate negative masculine norms, we can acknowledge the deeper manifestation of masculinity in the perception and perpetuation of negative sexual assault attitudes. So the religiosity measures all exemplified that most of the respondents adhere to Islamic tenets, but were weak in terms of helping us understand how their religious identity impacts their perceptions of sexual assault. So I don't want to undermine the role of religion. However, I want this to signal a need to look further at other facets of religious identity and experiences and how they may uncover how sexual assault attitudes are formed. So overall, the study confirms that men, regardless of religious identity, are likely to perpetuate hegemonic masculinity within their perceptions of sexual assault. So this both contributes to the existing literature while also giving us an opportunity to delve into more cultural norms that perpetuate masculine dominance and sexual violence. In terms of the limitations of this study, they mostly stem from not being able to engage Muslim men in prior research, with a special regard to the scales, the methods, and the ability to recruit respondents. So the surveys and skills I used were adapted from validated measures, but none were created with Muslims in mind. So it's really hard to determine whether these measures fully capture how Muslim men perceive sexual assault. I also yielded a quite homogeneous sample in terms of high religiosity, as well as an unrepresentative sample in comparison to the larger Muslim American population, with a drastically underrepresentation of Black Muslims. So, but I also think that the largest limitation is the stigmatized topic of sexual assault, and the barriers within our own Muslim communities of not being able to engage in this larger social issue. So in terms of implications, we must elevate the presence of Muslim men within the larger conversation regarding sexual assault and its perpetuation. And I really want to uplift the Muslim men in this study who decided to engage in this survey, and by extension, a larger conversation confronting sexual assault. But in terms of research, I hope this study allows us, particularly Muslim researchers, to create more nuanced and culturally tailored measurements and tools that capture religious and cultural identity and experiences. And even more practically, I aim to utilize this research to further build culturally sensitive programming in partnership with HEART to dismantle these deeply ingrained attitudes rooted in hegemonic masculinity. And finally, just a word of advice for us all. We can only bring justice to survivors through critical engagement and community-based action that are rooted in destigmatizing and dismantling systems of sexual and gender-based violence perpetuated in our communities. So, thank you.